Only by Moonlight. Chapter 1, Prelude to the Most Sadistic Kiss. Somewhere in Japan, in an underpass near Shiba Station, a young man walked with a long black bag slung over his shoulder. It hung down to the back of his calves as he exited the underpass. A bright supermoon shone in the distance, contrasting with the young man's dark skin. The moonlight painted his skin in a dazzling, almost blood-red light, revealing to nervous passersby that he was about 16 years old. He stood 6 feet tall with short, curly hair, wearing a white tank top and black sweatpants like he had just come from the gym. He walked with a look of disdain on his handsome face as he looked up at the starry night sky and its supermoon. "I hate this time of year," he thought. "Who cares about Christmas, a devil-worshipping holiday anyway? People starve and die from the evil of men everywhere in this world. Why am I trapped here? Why can't I escape my fate? I hate it, I hate it, I hate it." The last part escaped his lips in a roar that made everyone around him turn in his direction. He heard the voice of a small girl with her mother. "Why is that crazy man screaming to himself?" He looked down at the little girl and said, "Who are you, and why can't you mind your business?" The mother pulled her daughter close and brushed past the troubled young man. He wasn't necessarily bad and actually thought of himself as a hero. But in this world, to become a hero who saves, you must become a monster who kills. Either way, someone is dying. He would rather it be the strong than the weak. He watched them depart with crimson eyes before turning to go about his business of doing nothing and being nothing but a thug who wanted to be more. His name was Wave, given to him by the young Japanese couple who found him abandoned after a tsunami. As our hero, or villain depending on who you ask, turned down a dark alley, at the same time something flew by his head at breakneck speed. If he had long hair, it would have ruffled it. It continued past him for quite some distance before bouncing off the driver's side window of a bus and landing in a baby stroller. The woman pushing the stroller looked down to see. At the same time, Wave slightly straining to come up with what just flew by his head. He couldn't quite make out what it was, but if he had to guess, he would have said it was a human. Screamed, yeah, that's what he thought it was, continuing to scream in horror at the sight of a human head looking back at her. Wave thought, yelp, it's a human head, but didn't break his concentration from what was in front of him. What he saw was beyond belief. He watched as one man, whom he nicknamed Machete, dismantled and decimated about 50 other men. It was hard to keep count because they kept dropping one by one. Each took only one blow to be put down for good. Every time Machete's blow landed, a body part went flying, legs, arms, even a man's whole torso split from his bottom half with an uppercut. This was Kung Fu Hustle level over the top, just a whole lot bloodier. Machete shoved his hand through 5 men's chests at once, then with a flick of his shoulder, all 5 men broke apart like Lego pieces, blood and guts flying everywhere. The number of men dwindled down to about 10 in a span of 1 minute. Now, without so many bodies cluttering the alleyway, Wave could see that Machete was defending a woman with medium-length, money green hair. Her skin was the color of coffee with French vanilla creamer, and she had a very nice body, at least from what he could see from the back. He thought to himself, at a time like this, why would I feel an urge of lust over this woman? I guess it's true what they say, all men are beasts. A wicked smile graced his face at the thought. He couldn't ever remember feeling lust this strong before. That split second of idle thoughts was all it took for Machete to destroy the remaining 10 men. They went flying into walls and into the air, never to be seen again, or were just broken apart. He watched as the last man charged with a suicidal scream toward this unstoppable force. The scream was cut short as the man's head flew off in a swatting motion. There was no sound in the alleyway for what seemed like an eternity. The man, drenched in blood, breathed out heavy steam into the night air as the woman slowly took 2 steps back and reached to her side. From a small triangular pouch, she produced a sword with a white-hot light that smoldered and produced puffs of white smoke. Wave thought to himself, a lightsaber. For real. A freaking lightsaber. I have to be dreaming. He couldn't help but chuckle, which caught the attention of the lady. Now that he got a good look at her, she was beyond attractive, the kind of beauty that could break up houses or captivate an entire country, start or stop wars, and easily compel 50 men or 1,000,000 to die for her. He himself would have fallen under her spell if he didn't have a voice of reason always whispering in his ear. He bit his bottom lip and reminded himself that he wasn't one of them. She wore an all-red kimono, cut short at the waist. Her bust size was at least a double D, her skin a French vanilla mocha color. But most of all, what held his attention were her eyes, the color of gold, that seemed to illuminate the night around her. He'd never seen a girl with that eye color before. He felt hypnotized. He figured that with no one left to protect her, she would try to drag him into the fight. Not surprisingly, that's what she did. But what was surprising was that she covered 100 feet in what seemed like one step, with the killer right behind her. He mouthed the words thanks a lot as she ran by him, machete not far behind. The monster of a man wore a tank top that Wave suspected was once white and red Adidas tracksuit pants. It seemed like Machete changed his trajectory and was going to ignore Wave and keep running after the lady. Anyone else would have breathed a sigh of relief, but Wave was pissed off to be looked down on. He purposely stepped in front of the monster's path. The charging beast did a little shrug as if to say, "Have it your way," then reared back, ready to strike. Wave didn't try to evade but instead reached behind him for the black bag and brought it in front of his chest just in time to block the punch. As expected, the punch pushed Wave back from the entrance of the alleyway to the center of the opposite lane of the 4-lane road. Just then, a public bus was bearing down on him. Without a second to spare, Wave put the black bag underneath his feet, somehow holding one end in his hand so that it was at a 180-degree angle, then jumped on it. Whatever was in that bag sprang him up in the air over the bus. But what goes up must come down, and he landed hard on top of the bus and was rolled around quite violently until he was thrown off. One would think he would have landed in a jumbled mess on the road, but he didn't. He landed like a spinning top. When the momentum was gone, he was in a pose with his right leg extended far out and his left leg bent, looking like a half split, with the black bag held down in front of him. Both the monster and his prey were shocked into stillness. The monster was so stunned that he didn't even notice the state of his arm. It was split right through the middle, from elbow to shoulder and beyond. Resembling the electrical wires above him that had also split and begun spitting out electricity. He didn't even notice the pain until steam rose from the wound as his body began its healing process. Watching Wave in his pose, the monster remembered the words of his master, "The planet you're going to is full of weaklings, so you shouldn't have a problem unless you have the severe bad luck of running into a Reaper's lover." He had asked his master with a smirk, "What is that? I've never heard of that before." "It's just the name the old ones came up with for them," his master had said. "The few left of humanity that can still access some of the power that God sealed away long ago. There are only a few of our kind still left who remember what they once were. If they still had their powers, we would be the ones to call them monsters because they were all in love with war. It was the only time they were happy, even more so if they were losing. And they had a funny way of changing the outcome of any battle, no matter who their opponent was. As if they had won the favor of death itself. Just saying, if you run into one, I don't even think they exist anymore, be on guard." The monster had let out a thunderous laugh. "Just my luck," he'd said with a smile. But his smile soon faded when Wave flashed a smile of his own and unzipped his black bag. It revealed 2 moon crescent swords the color of the darkest midnight. They seemed to glow, no, not glow, they were absorbing all the light. Not the electricity, just the light from it, making it look like black electricity crackling around them. For 10 blocks, all the light went out. Car motors still worked, but drivers crashed into one another in the sudden darkness. The only light that was allowed to shine was the light of the full moon. It seemed to shine just on Wave. The beautiful woman whispered almost like in a trance, "Found you?" Wave turned his head slightly and said, "Found who?" The monster's smile faded and changed to an angry expression. "What is this feeling?" he thought. "Could it be fear? If it is, I don't like it." Immediately, to chase away the doubt in his mind, he launched himself forward toward Wave, aiming for his head. Right before he made impact, Wave vanished, and the monster went right past him. When he looked back, he saw Wave looking at him over his shoulder, smiling like a child playing with a toy. "You think this is a game?" the monster said and once again charged in. But it was more of the same. Wave evaded every one of his attacks. The monster punched with his right, then his left, and again with his right. The only problem was that he just now realized that his right arm from the elbow down wasn't there anymore. He didn't even see when Wave cut it off. It was then that he realized what Wave was doing. He was riding the force from his attacks. How? He thought. This boy would have to be able to read his movements, and no one in Giga's army could match his speed, let alone read his movements. He leapt back to put distance between himself and Wave. Moments later, his arm was finished regenerating. With this knowledge, he went on the attack again, but this time he broke up his rhythm, throwing shorter punches. One punch caught Wave, causing a large cut on his right cheek, but it wasn't with the power he normally had. They were face to face. Wave smiled and said, "My turn." And with his blades, he let loose a blindingly fast series of attacks. Now the monster was running, or at least trying to. Every swing of Wave's swords made contact. First, the monster lost a hand, then a forearm. The monster had a thought he'd never had before in battle: I need to escape. As if sensing this change in the monster's thoughts, Wave figured it was time to stop playing and went on to crush any hopes of victory, let alone any chance of escape. Next went the monster's legs. On his way down, he watched as Wave moved with blinding intensity, then everything went black. The woman watched with an almost shaken expression as Wave kept slashing at a pile of limbs and guts. She jumped on the hood of a car and stomped her foot, trying to break him out of his berserker mode. With a look of frustration on her face, she screamed at the top of her lungs, "Hey, boy!" It still didn't work, so she ripped off the side mirror of the car and chucked it at him. It hit him dead center in the forehead and made his head snap back. That got his attention, but not in the way she wanted. He looked at her like she was next on the menu. The look of fear across her face snapped him out of it. In that moment, a flashback came to his mind of a different girl altogether, covered in tears and screaming. All of a sudden, every light for 10 blocks came back on. He looked down at the woman. With the same blank expression he had before the fight began, he was almost taken by her beauty. But beauty fades, he thought. He wanted the warrior princess, not a princess who needed saving. He went to turn and walk away, but in a flash, she was in front of him, way faster than a human. "You have to come with me," she said. "He won't be down for long. If he gets up, he'll get put right back down," Wave said in response. She smiled at this and said, "Not because of him? Because I've been looking for you. I have something I have to show you." "I'm not interested," he said, "unless it has $signs behind it." "Do I look like I need money?" She said. "There are a lot of poor people that buy expensive shit they don't need," he said. "There's only one way to find out," she said. He thought for a minute, then said, "Take me to this thing you have to show me." "To Black Mansion," she said. Moments later, he stood in front of her sprawling estate. It had to be a mile long before you got to the actual house. No, not a house, that's an understatement, more like a palace. It was unique in the way that it fit its name. It was painted all black, but not a normal black. It was a glossy black that seemed to reflect everything like a mirror. Even more than that, it seemed to have a presence. And if you looked hard enough, he could have sworn it was breathing. He almost thought twice about going in, money or not, but his curiosity won out. As he entered, he was greeted by what had to be thousands of people cheering for him like he was some kind of hero. But a nagging thought, or voice, in the back of his head rang true yet again, like it always did when he was surrounded by crowds of people. The voice said, "Feed me." And everything began to fade to black. He was only snapped out of it by the girl with gold eyes who had brought him here. He found out her name was Kyoto. Her screaming voice had broken through the encroaching darkness. "Enough," she told everybody. "He's tired." She took him by the hand and began to walk. He looked to his right and noticed the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. She had long dark hair, mocha-colored skin, and everything a man wanted: full breasts, hourglass hips. He had seen beautiful women before, but there was something different about this one. He had never felt so compelled to approach a woman in his life, but he couldn't resist. He began moving through the crowd, almost shoving people to the side to get to her. The closer he got, the more desperate he became. It was then that Kyoto caught his arm and said, "You touch that one, you won't make it back." He ignored her, still trying to move his feet in the direction of the woman with jet black hair. Lucky for him, Kyoto was 10 times stronger than him, which he still didn't understand. She easily dragged him to her destination. Kyoto dragged him away from the beautiful girl and into a separate place. After the door slammed shut in his face, the spell was broken, and he finally regained his senses. As he surveyed the room he was in, he was amazed by how beautiful it looked. The ceiling was solid gold, with a globe-looking thing that appeared to be made of pure diamond hanging in the center like a disco ball. The walls and floor, in contrast to the ceiling, seemed to be the color of pearl black. In the center of the room, under the diamond disco ball thing, was an all-white bed with a white canopy surrounding it. Kyoto spoke from just behind him. "That's my office," she said with a huge smile on her face as she pointed to the bed. He looked back at her, amused. "I know I'm easy," his eyes said, "but not that easy. I think I have a right to have a discussion in the other girl's office." You will probably die if you did, Kyoto responded, and I wasn't asking. She stepped forward, put her hands on his chest, and pushed. Wave didn't know what hit him as his body lifted off the floor and flew through the air for what seemed like a second, straight through the canopy and onto the bed. He landed quite awkwardly, his back hitting the bedpost, his legs going straight up in the air, then coming back down with a thump. By the time his feet came down, Kyoto stood above him, looking down and smiling. Wave, looking up with wide eyes, said in almost a whisper, "What are you?" With the same tone, Kyoto responded, "Vampire." Then she opened her mouth, and huge fangs sprouted from her canines, reaching down past her chin. Wave's eyes grew wider, threatening to pop out of his head. Now it was Kyoto's turn to be surprised as Wave swept her legs out from under her. Before her butt touched the mattress, Wave was already running for the door. Looking behind himself, he said, "There's just no way in hell you are sticking those things in me." As he approached the door, it slid open like mall doors. Just outside, a crowd had gathered. He stopped at the threshold, and what he saw made his skin crawl. There were monsters mingled with some of the regular-looking people. One looked like some sort of fish girl, pretty but still fishy. Another looked like Frankenstein's bride. Last but not least was a wolf girl. This only gave him a moment's pause because he remembered the long-toothed vampire behind him who, any moment now, was going to come up from behind and stick her fangs in his neck. He immediately pushed through the crowd and began running in the direction he had just come, toward the front door. The wolf girl yelled behind him, "You're not going to like what you see." Running past numerous figures, he finally made it to the door and flung it open. She was right. He didn't like what he saw. Beyond the door and beyond the gates to the mansion was the city, all black. No city lights, no street lights, no nothing. But what he did see, bright in the distance, was Earth getting further and further away every second. He let out a thunderous scream into the vacuum of space.